Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the apparent panic among some Brexiteers over the checks on some EU goods that are about to take place, creating more severe trade problems than we've already experienced. It seems somewhat strange to listen to Brexit supporters panicking about the prospect of us controlling our borders. But then Brexit is strange. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news in politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So this feels like another continuation of various themes that I've been discussing. Recently, I talked about how Brexit shortages, for example, of workers has left us with shortages of food. And it hasn't just hit imported food, but we can't actually produce as much food as we used to. So we're going to actually need to import even more food from overseas, and that means more food from the EU. Now, this is going to be complicated for a few reasons. You know, there's the flooding in Northern Europe, for example, has hit potato production. There's already been warnings about a shortage of chips this winter in this country as a result. But the major issue is checks. You see, we left the customs union and single market at the beginning of this year. Without an agreement on free movement of goods, well, we lose the capacity to have free movement of goods. So there's more paperwork to make sure that goods passing either side of this border meet the requirements of its destination market. And of course, checks on some of those goods are needed as well. Only we didn't apply the checks, didn't have the staff, didn't have the facilities. EU countries did because they'd spent the last few years building them. They applied their full checks from January the 1st of this year. We just let things through. Dead against international trade rules, of course, and not the sort of thing we can get away with for long, because it means giving EU businesses an unfair competitive advantage over, say, US and Chinese businesses, for example. So we said we'd apply them in July, and then we didn't. They're still not ready, you see. Now we say we're going to apply full checks from next January. We'll see. But there are still a lot of checks coming online this October. And there's been no delay announced for these. And, you know, given that we're now, about 5 weeks from them, you know, we're getting towards that. Every week we get nearer that date without an announcement of a delay, the more you think, we're actually going ahead with these. The government website has the details of what we're doing, rules on what you're not allowed to import from the EU. It includes, amongst other things, chilled minced meats, as well as frozen or chilled minced poultry, includes other foodstuffs as well. But you may recognise that idea of chilled mince. It's the same list of foods that we're not allowed to transport from Britain to Northern Ireland due to the Northern Ireland Protocol. Well, actually, we are allowed at the moment because we have a grace period that delays that ban. But the ban is in effect. It's like, a ban on foods from third countries to the EU. Well, we're just replicating the same ban in the opposite direction, which is, again, perfectly normal. The grace period was already extended for Northern Ireland, but that's also set to end in October as well. Now, here's the thing. We currently have a shortage of food in Britain. Not outside Britain. Don't bother trying to excuse it with other factors. Yes, there are factors around the world that are affecting food supplies, internationally affecting food prices internationally. But other countries around Europe, including Northern Ireland, part of the UK, don't have empty shelves in supermarkets, don't have restaurants closing because they can't get food. The fact that we alone have been hit specifically like this is because of Brexit. And because Brexit is still going on, and the government are not even steering it to a less insane form of Brexit, we're still going to have those shortages. The shortages are related to both the production of food and the transport of food. Now, because our food production has been hit, banning certain foods for import from the EU is only going to put more pressure on food supplies. I talked recently about how Brexit has already increased our reliance on food imports. You know, we need to import more. Well, in October, unless there's another delay, we're going to reduce the amount of food that we can import by a lot. So the first step is banning foods, as I say. The second step is applying certain checks to the foods that can be imported. So of the list of food, well, animal products, really, the government website says that POAO, which is products of animal origin, they're going to face the safeguarding measures from next January. So that's when the full checks come in. But the import controls will apply to other aspects from this October. They'll need to be amongst the various bits of new documentation that's going to be needed. They're going to need a health certificate. Now, that's not the case right now. That's new. So when I say we're not applying checks, I don't just mean the paperwork still has to be done. We're just not checking it. The documentation doesn't have to be there, but it will in October. So consider what this means. There's some paperwork required for the import of food from the EU that is allowed. A health certificate is one of those bits of documentation. That means more vets will be required to certify these. I mean, those would be vets on the EU side. I don't know whether they've got the capacity to manage that easily. These certificates will be required for most animal products from October. Now, obviously, once you introduce a load of extra documentation to the process, you do two things. One, you increase the time and expense needed for EU businesses to export to Britain. That makes it more difficult and more expensive to get their products into the country. Secondly, you do all that, you've had your costs added onto that, then you increase the amount of time it takes to get across the border because checks will need to take place. Now, the second one's the real killer. We've already got a shortage of lorry drivers. We can ill afford to have the few remaining ones stuck at customs control. It's already bad enough that a lot of them get stuck outbound. It'll be inbound as well. And I've seen no evidence that we still have the facilities and the staff to carry out these checks in an efficient manner. Not only were we moving too slowly onto these anyway, but the pandemic has surely hampered effort to get things in place. Now, consider the impact of Brexit on our food exports to the EU in January this year. Remember how that went? Exporters faced huge delays. Quite a lot of food was just left rotting because of the delays, or because when they got there they found they weren't actually allowed to export it at all. Some found that they just actually couldn't export their goods anymore. It led to a huge reduction in the amount of food that we were exporting to the EU. Annoying for EU customers who'd ordered it, but they are part of a continent-spanning market from which to get alternatives. Okay, those alternatives may not be what they ideally wanted, which is why they were buying from Britain in the first place, but they had alternatives. What's going to happen here in the reverse situation? We're going to see that same huge reduction in the level of EU food exports to Britain, with one possible proviso I'll go over in a minute. But unlike the EU businesses, ours are stuck in a market smaller than the UK itself. We can't just replace EU food with our own because we're not producing enough. We're not even producing as much as we used to. Now, one little thing I did consider. So as of this October, assuming there's no more delays, there are to be controls on animal products from the EU. This includes a range of things, but food is my main focus here. But there are no checks on products being exported from Northern Ireland to Britain. Of course not, it's part of the UK. There are, in theory, some rules that apply, like you're not supposed to move food from the EU to Northern Ireland and then from Northern Ireland to Britain, without any paper chain. But my query is that if there's not going to be any checks, how will they know this isn't happening? Now, I've got no insight into this potential practice, but it seems to me that if we suddenly find ourselves importing a load more food from Northern Ireland than we used to, there may be a few people ignoring those rules. But, I mean, you can only transport so much down that route anyway. A particular trade route only has so much capacity. It's not like it would be a major bypass of import controls. So the situation will be that we have food shortages as a result of various Brexit-related policies. The government are refusing to reverse any of those policies, so the shortages are getting worse. There's been a gradual decline in food stocks because we were managing on pre-Brexit stockpiling for a while. These stocks have been dwindling. We are now planning on slowing down the flow of food from the EU to a trickle. This will also increase the costs of that food. It will worsen the lorry driver shortage because more of them will be stuck. More lorry drivers will decide it's not worth coming through Britain at all. A lot of people have been noticing that the price of food has increased quite a bit during 2020. Again, global food prices have been going up a bit, but some things we've noticed have been increasing by over 50% since the start of the year. In fact, this and the increasing cost of second-hand cars was cited by the Office for National Statistics as being behind the higher than expected levels of inflation this year. Imagine what's going to happen after this next phase of Brexit is to be implemented. And I said long before we actually left the EU, I could imagine the Brexiteers getting away with a shrinking economy or worse trade deals. People paying attention will see the harm of Brexit in a way that most of the public won't. People don't notice these things. They read the papers, believe what they're being told because they don't see the impact themselves. Even when they feel the impact, they don't see the link. But empty supermarket shelves, some will see. Some Brexit supporters must do the shopping, and they will see that. And if more businesses start being honest about what's causing the shortages, more people will see it as well. If the shortages persist or even worsen, and they are set to do so, then there has to come a point where people start to question if this sovereignty, which they certainly can't see improving their lives, is really worth not having enough food for. And I think that's why there's a note of panic appearing among some Brexiteers now. I'm seeing the odd little article. You know, some are desperately trying to blame the EU for it, of course, but there are those who recognise that at the end of the day, when you deprive people of what they need to live their lives, blame only covers so much. People are going to start wanting to know what the government's going to do about it. After all, didn't we take back control? They know that the government have to do something to avert at least this impact of Brexit. Avert the impacts of Brexit that are going to really hurt people. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.